Okay, Math 8 students, we are continuing on with lesson 3.6, comparing functions. And what we're going to do now is we're going to go over a little additional practice. This is bonus. You don't have to do it. It's not required. But if you do want some more practice in a little bit more challenging scenario, this is something you might want to watch. Okay? So in this situation, we are comparing a graph and a description. So what we've got is Jamal, who wants to buy a new game system that costs $200. He does not have enough money to buy it today, so he compares layaway plans at different stores. And a layaway plan, if you guys don't know, it's like a payment plan. It means you pay a little bit now, and then you pay so much off. You have like payments every week or every month or something that are smaller than the initial payment. The plan at store A is shown on the graph. Okay, so this is store A here. And the plan at store B requires an initial payment of $60 and weekly payments of $20 until the balance is paid in full. So we're going to go ahead and write a couple equations for this, and then we're going to compare them. So the first equation, all right, hopefully it's still there. I unplugged my mic. All right. So the first equation that we're going to write is a linear equation in slope-intercept form for store A's layaway plan. Like x represent the number of weeks and y represent the balance owed. So our input is number of weeks and our output is balance owed. So balance owed is a function of the number of weeks that have passed. And that means that we are writing it in y equals mx plus b, y being our initial payment, our initial remaining payment, and m being our payment per week. So this is a little bit confusing, and it can be a little bit challenging because we've got a y-intercept here of 100, right? So that means that this is what's remaining after what he paid on the initial cost. So the initial cost was $200. He paid something, and then he had $100 left to pay, and that's what he's paying down with his weekly payments. So we know that 200 minus 100 is 100. So this is our remaining amount to pay. Okay, so that's our B value. And that's where it starts. There's $100 left to pay after he paid $100 towards the $200 total payment. Okay, now we're going to find our rate of change, which is our payments per week, right? So money per week, or of course change in y over change in x. So we're going to go ahead and I'm going to travel down to this nice clear intersection. I could use this one, but it's in the middle, and I'd rather just pick one that's at a clear point of an x and a y value. So I've got at 2 weeks, we've gone from $100 to $80. So it's gone down from 100 to 80, so it's minus 20 over 2 weeks. We simplify that, and that means that he pays $10 per week. So if we're going to write this into equation, this is how much he has left to pay after his what he's paid towards the total cost, and this is how much he's paying per week towards that remaining amount of money. So the equation would be y equals negative 10, because he's paying $10 per week against the amount owed, and he has an initial value of $100, meaning that he has $100 still to pay after his down payment, which was $100, because there's $100 left to pay. And that's how it gets a little confusing, is making sure that you have the right remaining value, the right remaining balance. Here in B, what we're going to do is we're going to do the same thing, and we've got to pull that information from our description. So store B requires an initial payment of $60 and weekly payments of $20 until the balance is paid in full. So he started with $200 as what it's going to cost him. He has to pay $60 towards that up front before he pays anything per week, which means he's got $140 left to pay. So this is actually his initial value, right? And that's how we would plot that on the graph. He's got $140 left to pay because he paid $60 up front. And then our rate of change is $20 per week. So in this case, M would be negative $20 per 1 week, right? So m equals negative 20. So we plug that into the equation and we have y equals negative 20x plus 140. Not 60. He pays 60 against the 200, and he has $140 left to pay with the payment plan of $20 per week. So what we're going to do now is we're going to give a visual representation, and we're going to go ahead and graph that. So we know that he's got $140 left to pay because he paid $60 down, and he's paying at $20 per week. So at 1 week, he's gone down from 140 to 120. At 2 weeks, he's gone down from 120 to 100, right, because he's paying down $20 per week. At 3 weeks, we go down another 20. 4, 5, 6, and 7. And that makes sense because if he's paying $20 per week, 20 times 7 is 140. So we know that that is the correct line there. And we're just going to connect it with dashes. We're not actually going to connect it with a solid line because he's not paying in between each week. He's paying at the end of each week, right? So the value in between doesn't mean much to us. So we're not going to connect those points. So the next question is asking us, how can you use graph to tell which payment plan requires a greater down payment? How can you use the equations? So which one requires a greater down payment is going to be shown to us by how much is remaining when we start the payment plan, right? So in this case, plan B has $140 remaining after the initial payment, right? So it has a greater amount to pay off after the initial payment, whereas plan A has $100 left to pay off after the initial payment. So you can use your y-intercept to tell how much has been paid and how much is left to be paid. And so that's what we're going to say. We're going to talk about the y-intercept there. So how can we use the graph? We can look at the y-intercept. Which represents 0 weeks, right? To find out how much is left to, how much is remaining to be paid. How much, Jamal? Now looking at the graphs, we know that store A has a greater payment, initial payment, because only $100 is left to pay off. Right? Whereas store B has $150 or $140. Okay. With the equations, you would also do the same thing. You would look at the y-intercept. So that's the second part of that, is you would look at this y-intercept here and see how much is left to pay. The one that has a greater amount left to pay is the one that had the lower initial payment. So the difference of the initial payment, the original cost there, which is $200, right? So E is asking us, how can you use the graphs to tell which plan requires the greater weekly payment? How can you use the equations? So if you're looking at the graph, you're looking at the slope, right? So in this case, the one with the greater weekly payment will have a steeper slope. The slope, or rate of change, right, will be steeper for a greater initial payment. So store B this tells us that, so store B that store B has a greater weekly payment. And that weekly payment is $20 per week, right? As opposed to store A, which is $10. Let's go ahead and take a look down here at that last question. Which plan allows Jamal to play the game system faster? Meaning, which one lets him pay off sooner? Looking at store A, it's going to take him 10 weeks until he has that game system paid off. Even though he's paying less money per week, it takes him longer. Whereas store B, he's going to have that balance paid off in 7 weeks. And that's shown by the graph, right? Because when you hit $0 remaining left to pay, it's been 7 weeks for store B and 10 weeks for store A. So store B, let's see, how do I want to word this? The store B has a 0 balance. Means there's nothing left to pay at 7 weeks versus store A, which has a 0 balance at 10 weeks. Okay, so that was a little bit of a long explanation, but this was a pretty complex question, and it asked us to think at a little bit higher order level of thinking. So that's good for us. That's all I've got for you guys. Again, this one was a bonus one, so hopefully you benefited from it. If you've got questions, of course, please come to class with those questions so you can ask, so we can go over them, and we can make sure that you're understanding. All right, guys, I'll see you on the flip side.